Hello, welcome to another Bleacher Report live stream here with James Palmer. I'm excited, guys, because I'm usually all alone while I'm out here, but I do have my Microsoft Copilot with me. Shameless plug, but also it makes my life a lot easier because I use just a laptop here to talk to all of you. And now I have multiple screens, so I can go on the chat here on the old Copilot and get a chance to interact with all of you. Let's talk about what we're going to go throughout the course of the next half hour as we do this every day, every Wednesday from noon to noon 30. We're going to talk about Tyreek Hill, the chances of him being on the move. Not so fast, my friend, Lee Corso, but we'll keep an eye on it. What's happening in San Francisco with all of the injuries? You know about Kittle. What could be the timetable for Brock Purdy? Could he play this Sunday? We'll get into that. Also, some big injuries at some big skill positions, maybe impacting your fantasy team, whether it's Brock Bowers, Drake London, Xavier Worthy. Get into some of those. And then Green Bay. I've done some deep digging this entire week. And did the Green Bay Packers go from being a Super Bowl contender to now a potential Super Bowl favorite? Ooh, we'll see. We'll see. And also with the Giants, they're sticking with Russ, but for how long? And really, what's going on in New York right now? We'll see what's going on. Panthers getting Hill. That's the first one in there. See, I already jumped in the chat. Let's get to Tyreek Hill. What we need to put out there first is, yes, the Dolphins looked bad. Looked bad on both sides of the ball. They were beat by a Colts team that a lot of people expect to be lower middle of the pack, and they made them look outstanding. McDaniel Jones looked like Peyton Manning. They scored on 7 straight possessions, all of their possessions. They found a way to put points on the board, so their punter essentially got the day off. And there's some things in Miami we got to get to, but specifically with Tyreek Hill. And everybody's talking about this being a player that could be on the move, considering what's going on in Miami, considering what we've seen this past offseason. I need to tell you to hit the brakes on this a little bit. It's week 1. Trades like this usually do not happen after 1 week. They usually don't happen after 2 weeks. Because that would be the Dolphins very, very early in the season, essentially saying that we're not very good, it's time to rebuild. That's when you make those moves. That's why we have the trade deadline. The other reason why these trades don't happen very, very early are because teams are figuring out if they made the right decisions during training camp on their teams, right? Whether they need it. Say the Steelers were interested in another receiver opposite of DK Metcalf. Calvin Austin went out and played really, really well week 1. Maybe we don't need to go out and make a trade for another wide receiver. Let's see how Austin plays over these next several weeks. So teams are still evaluating their own rosters. The Dolphins are still evaluating what they have in place in terms of their entire unit, their entire offense, and where they stand as a group moving forward throughout the course of this season. So could he potentially be on the move? Certainly. Could it be closer to the trade deadline? That's much more likely. I would say that would be a scenario that's much more likely to get into that. There are some things the teams are curious about. There's off-the-field allegations about domestic violence that came out yesterday. And we know that Tyreek Hill, however you want to see it yourself, has a checkered past in terms of off-the-field incidents. And that is a part of the evaluation of the player. Also a speed player that still appears very effective, but is on the other side of 30, 31, I think, in March. The financial side of it is a big part of it. Now, over $15 million got paid of this year's salary in August, so that's a big part of it. I think he has $10 million left and like almost $2 million per game roster bonus. I think it's like 1.8 per roster bonus. And then you look at where he's at performance-wise. He didn't reach 1,000 yards. He led the team, I believe, in several things, but it wasn't up to what they were all his fewest in a season. Catches, yards, touchdowns. Next gen stats, if you want to go there, he was his slowest of his career in terms of his max speed. I say all of this. These are just part of the evaluation process that teams are wondering how much capital they would have to give up if they want to acquire Tyreek Hill and what the trade compensation could essentially be. This could be a 4th round pick. This could be a 5th round pick. It could be somewhere in that range, but it's not something that the Dolphins are entertaining right now, to my understanding. It's something they didn't entertain in the offseason. Teams called during the offseason as they were watching the Dolphins go through this process of, we see you kind of, Jalen Ramsey has forced his way out of there. You guys have traded Jonnu Smith. You guys have, trying to turn over that locker room. They're looking at some of the malcontents that are in that room and seeing, are we going to try to change this culture? Are we going to try to change some things? Is Tyreek Hill available? Teams asked, and the Dolphins said no. Could that change before, the course of the trade deadline? Certainly. But again, it's way too early to do that. It's way too early for teams to be that aggressive, and it's probably too early for the Dolphins, with Mike McDaniel knowing where his job status is, where they need to perform this year. and they look like one of the worst teams in football after 1 week. So I think you have to pump the brakes on the timing. Doesn't mean it may not happen at some point before the deadline. All right, let's see what else. Let's jump in this chat. What's the projected compensation for Hill? I said it could be a 4th-round pick. It could be a 5th-round pick. I mean, depending on how far into the season it goes, obviously you're paying less if it goes into, further into the season. His contract's up after 2026. So all of these things are deciding factors on what the compensation would be, and how it would play out. Would make the Niners dangerous? I think he'd make a lot of teams dangerous. I mean, everybody brings up the Chiefs. I'll say that. He did leave on good terms. I covered that trade extensively when it happened because I was on the Chiefs so often at NFL Network back then. It did end on good terms. He wanted a lot more money, and he got a lot more money. And the Chiefs were looking to go in a different direction. Instead of putting their money in Tyreek Hill, they wanted to invest it in the draft capital they got, and they did. And they got a lot of really good players out of the trade. So could a reunion be on the table? Possibly. They've had a hard time getting all of these guys on the field, whether it be Hollywood Brown, whether it be Xavier Worthy. All of these guys have had injury issues. They want to get more explosive. They've definitely wanted to, and they haven't been able to do it. So there's some teams that definitely are interested. Tyreek to the Steelers, again, that I just mentioned them. They've been in the market for a number 2 wide receiver. Obviously, they've done plenty of deals with the Dolphins. But what if what you saw in week 1 from Austin is your number 2? And you don't have to give up the capital, and that's where you're at. So it's just early, and that's why we're going at it in the pace, or the league's going at it in the pace of which it is. Here we go. Let's go to the Niners. That's a team that could use a receiver because they've had a lot of guys banged up. We'll start real quick. George Kittle, he's going on IR. So that's the one that we definitely know with the hamstring, and he had a great camp, and he was a huge part of their game plan, to my understanding, in week 1. You saw him out there early, I think 4 catches on 4 targets, had a touchdown, gets the hamstring, is going to miss the next 4 games. I think putting him on IR is important because he was going to push for that 4th game, that game right there against the Rams on a Thursday night, because he's going to miss New Orleans. He's going to miss at home against the Cardinals and Jags, and then they were at the Rams on that Thursday. This kind of takes him and protects him from himself. They're not going to rush it. They want to keep him healthy for the back end of the season. So he goes on IR, and keep an eye on Luke Farrell, Jake Tongues. Those guys are going to step up, and that plays into what's happening with Brock Purdy. Now, Brock Purdy is battling a shoulder injury that's not that severe, to my understanding, on his non-throwing shoulder. The toe is the real issue, and the toe could be the one that keeps him off the field. And the Niners, to my understanding, haven't made a full decision on this, but if you want to read into it, usually when the head coach brings up the backup quarterback on their own, you start to read into it a little further. Kyle Shanahan was not at the podium yesterday talking about, we'll see how he goes through the week. We'll see how he progresses. We'll see how much he can practice. He said, if he can't go, Mac Jones, we have a lot of faith in him. I would read into that. And so Mac Jones is the backup there, which is kind of ironic because I remember being at Mac Jones Pro Day down there in Tuscaloosa and seeing Kyle Shanahan there. And Kyle really enamored with the Pro Day. And he has a lot of the traits that Kyle likes. I remember talking to teams during that draft process. It was Mac Jones has the best processing information of all of these quarterbacks in this draft. He goes and has a good rookie year in New England. We know how everything exploded. We know the reports about Bill Belichick not talking to him, about having co-offensive coordinators that are a DC and a special teams coordinator. They thought he had a pretty decent camp, that he can run their offense. And that might be something we see on Sunday. We could definitely see it. Juwan Jennings, we saw that shoulder injury kind of getting jammed a little bit downfield. Didn't return from that. All the scans came back clean. We're going to evaluate throughout the week, but I think there's a decent chance he ends up playing in this game. So the Niners are battling a number of injuries. I think Ricky Pearsall looked pretty good, right? They still don't have Brandon Ayuk, but defense looked pretty good as well as they snuck away with a win against the Seahawks. So let's go to I might be the only Bleacher Report that knows anything. That makes me namaste. Couple of injuries that could be impacting maybe your fantasy team, maybe the way some teams had started off. Brock Bowers is the first one. I'll just want to say this, and this is always a PSA. I love when I make calls around the league and everybody just universally has the same consensus. It's that Brock Bowers is the best tight end in football. And that's almost universal to everyone. You saw him going out there having a monster game, playing really, really well, and then he comes and, he goes over 100 and then runs that in-breaking route and kind of comes up hobbling a little bit. They took him into the medical tent. They evaluated him. I think the good news would be that he wanted to come back in the game, which means they didn't tell him anything on the sideline that would certainly keep him off. The bad news would be that the trainers told him, we don't want you to go back into the game. Now, the score played a part in that, to my understanding. They always remain a touchdown up. They're going to take it day by day, and they have an extra day, I believe. They play Monday night, right, against the Chargers. I think that's a big deal. The extra day in Pete Carroll's mind, I think, helps out Brock Bowers. And I would also add this. If you watch the San Paulo game on Friday and you watch the way Derwin James playing that nickel spot really just kept the clamps on Travis Kelce for 99.9% of that game. Now, there was a coverage breakdown that wasn't his assignment, and Kelce had that massive touchdown. But if Bowers is slowed by any stretch, that's Derwin James's assignment, and that could actually help out the Chargers a little bit in how that goes down. Xavier Worthy, speaking of that San Paulo game, you saw 3 plays in. He gets a dislocated shoulder. They had to pop it back into place, I'm told, on the field. Andy Reid's calling it day by day. That's a lie. But that's what Andy does at the podium. He just always says, well, we'll figure it out. Could he play in the next month? We'll see. They haven't placed him on IR. They probably have till Sunday to do that if they want to. He could go out there, and this is just kind of putting the pieces together. He could go out there and practice and off to the side and maybe run some routes and see how it feels with a brace, and they could come to the conclusion, we should put you on IR, we shouldn't. You might miss 2 games or 3. Let's avoid IR. Maybe you'll come back by the 4th. Tell them all the concerns about coming back earlier from this and the issues that you could have if you re-injure it. All this is getting evaluated in Kansas City right now. I think it's safe to say he's not playing against the Eagles in that Super Bowl rematch. So that won't be there. And it's just been an issue with this offense in Hollywood Brown going down last year, Rashee Rice going down last year. They've wanted to be explosive for 2 years in a row. They just have had issues. Xavier Worthy was the biggest part of that game plan, to my understanding, on Friday. And then he's knocked out after 3 plays. You saw Hollywood step up a little bit, but that's one that it's going to be a couple of weeks, and I think we'll have to evaluate there. So positive news as a pass catcher, Drake London, he's on my fantasy team. He's going to practice today. Darnell Mooney, who also has a shoulder injury there in Atlanta, is going to practice today. They expect Drake London to play on Sunday. They missed him at the end of the game there, and well, he couldn't play defense, I guess, and stop Baker. But he had another game where he's a go-to guy for Michael Penix. The shoulders, it's just an AC joint sprain on that right shoulder, I'm told, and so they expect him to go, which is a good thing. And we'll see what happens in that revenge game for Kirk Cousins against the Vikings. Let's see. I want a Joe Mixon report also. Not a lot going on there. There really isn't. And I don't know if we'll get any information for a little while. I mean, we know how covert the Texans have been with the information that they're giving about Joe Mixon. I would read into that a little bit. I think they don't know the timeline. That part's a guess, but it's a pretty educated guess. I think they don't know the timeline. I think this could be a little while. He's obviously starting the season on IR, so it's or the list where your injury happened off season. Bowers gave you that. What else do we got? Trade Lamar Jackson for Joe Burrow and Alvin Kamara and McBride. Would you do that trade? That's awesome. Yeah, that's a no-brainer trade, honestly. Joe's in that group of the top. I don't know why we're talking about this hypothetical trade. Neither team's trading Joe Burrow or Lamar Jackson, but Trey McBride's a top 5 tight end, maybe a top 3. He's an offensive weapon. And Alvin, I think, still has got something. And Joe is I'm a huge fan of Joe. I think Christian Watson coming back soon, contract extension as a possible outlook. Yeah, I think everything's trending really, really well in the right direction. I did my show yesterday, 89, and we broke down a couple of different things that'll come out this week with Steve Smith Sr. and I. And Steve really thinks Matthew Golden is the one there already. Doesn't mean, they don't like Christian Watson. They don't like what he brings to the table. Certainly do. But they drafted Matthew Golden to be that one. And I think they have a ton of weapons and they have a bunch of guys on rookie contracts, and they're going to sort out what's happening in that group. I'll get to more Packers stuff in a little bit. Do you see Kamara being moved by the trade deadline? That's an interesting one. I haven't really heard it much, but I could see it. They're in a total rebrand, rebuild with a first-year, head coach that's an offensive mind that is going to get some time and some patience. They're probably looking at quarterbacks in the 2026 draft. What could you get from a contender for Alvin? I mean, we'll see. I mean, I think he can still really play, and I think he's a safety net and a great addition for whatever quarterback you have. but we'll see what ends up happening. Do you see a future where the Bears ever get it right at quarterback? I'm ready for Bajan. I had an interesting conversation with my buddy Brian Baldinger the other day about this, and he brought up something that I don't think's been talked about and I hadn't really noticed, is that Tyson Bajan and that contract and everything that you hear Ben Johnson talk about with Bajan, he feels like it's almost trying to motivate Caleb and see if it can push Caleb. Like, hey, Tyler does this. Bajan does this. Watch him do this. He does this right. He checks this box. He does this. And it's almost like a hard love type of coaching to kind of tell his quarterback, like, these are the traits that I need you to build on and bring into your game on top of the talent that you have. I listen, a lot of things. The defense ran out of gas with Chicago. Early on, the offense was moving really well. They let them hang around way too long, and that's what ended up happening. Kevin O'Connell's a great coach. God, he's a good coach. I think there was a lot to be excited about there. I do. Is Keenan Allen back? Yeah, he is. What else is on here? I like scrolling with my finger on this new surface. Okay, now let's go to Green Bay. I mentioned Green Bay, and I want to talk about them. I've talked to a lot of people this week, some people in Green Bay, some people around the league, and my question is this. The Packers were a legit team last year. They were the only team in the NFL that had a top 5 offense and a top 5 defense in yards per game in the league. They were already good. Then you add Micah Parsons, a top 5 maybe player in this league, right before the start of the season. And are you now a Super Bowl favorite? If I go and look at what they did in this game, I'm reading the tea leaves and saying they very much well could be. Because I mentioned how talented they already were on both sides of the ball. Their issue last year was in the division. Guys, they went 10-1 in non-divisional games last year. 6 of their 7 losses happened in the NFC North. Well, to start off the season against one of the dominant teams in there, in the Lions, is huge, and it helps you in your division. If they're going to be better in the division, obviously that bodes well for the way that their Super Bowl chances are going to go, and their postseason alignment and slotting is going to play a part in that as well. And then you look at what Micah Parsons did playing just 45% of the snaps. He had 3 pressures, 1 resulted in an interception, 1 resulted in a sack. My understanding is this. He has bought in big time with Jeff Hafley and his group, has done everything that they've asked him to do, whether it's even dropping coverage, which a lot of pass rushers don't want to do. He has been open to everything that they've asked him to do. They've had a plan, a very distinct plan to my understanding, to where they're going to use him in a variety of ways, and they're going to try to put him in a lot of different places on that defense. And he has a really high football IQ. I don't know if that's out there enough, but he knows his stuff. And he has worked on his off days, on team off days, after hours with the defensive line coach, with everybody there, and he's gotten up to speed very quickly. Look for his snap count to go up on Thursday. Now, it's a short week. We'll see how much it goes up, but you add him to Rashawn Gary and a defense that was top 5 in a lot of categories, and they were 12th in the NFL on third down. I think that skyrockets now with Gary and Mike on the field at the same time. And they can rush 4, and they're so fast as a defense. And they really play press, and they cover the middle of the field so well. I just think Jordan Love also taking another step, and that's another thing I want to mention. There's been like a 2-year process where Matt LaFleur has been building Jordan Love up. They could have maybe won with a smaller playbook, less on his plate, and maybe had him set up to succeed a little bit more. But LaFleur has been thinking long-term with his quarterback, going, I need him to do what Aaron used to do. I need him to run the 2-minute himself. I need him to see things at the line of scrimmage and have the ability to check to more things and get into the right plays more himself. And in year 3, they really believe that's going to happen. They have an exotic run game that is really effective. And you have all these different pieces that he can throw the football to. And you have an emerging tight end, like a really good tight end in Kraft. Like they think the world of him. I think this is a team that is the biggest threat right now to the Philadelphia Eagles. I do. In the NFC. We'll see, because this is a monster on Thursday night between the Packers and the Commanders, who are 2 teams that are right there at the top of the NFC. How does this speed of this defense contain Jaden Daniels? How does this entire unit up front contain him with just 4 against a revamped offensive line there in Washington? And then defensive, then they flip it, and can the Commanders keep up with what they expect Jordan Love to do? I think this is a big telltale sign on Thursday for all of this. All right, let's get back in this chat here. Green Bay defense is great. Yeah, I wrote this down. I don't know if it's in here. they were like top five in almost everything last year. I mean, they really are. Like they play really fast. That's the biggest thing that you hear. They rob the middle of the defense. McKinney's outstanding. Like they really have a really good defense. Um, what else we got? Do you trade Sampson for a second or hold him? I'd hold him. Are the Steelers really in the trading conversation for Hill? I think they were in the wide receiver conversation. Go back to it. Maybe you didn't hear me in the beginning. They were wanting to see if one of the guys on the roster would emerge as that complement. They also love the tight end room, so those are all pass catchers in Aaron's mind. He thinks it's the best tight end room he's ever played with. So who's that complement to DK? They're trying to find out early on if it's already on their roster. And from week one, the player might already be on their roster. Will the Packers de-neutralize Daniels on Thursday night? I think the speed of their defense plays a part in this for sure. Jane just runs around people. I'm not sure people remember this. He led them in rushing last year. I mean, he was their leading rusher. I don't know if that's sustainable. By the way, that puts me on a little tangent of some work I put in this week. Did you guys know that 13 of the 31 rushing touchdowns in week one were by quarterbacks? That's 42% of the rushing touchdowns in week one were by quarterbacks. And I just thought of that because Jaden led the Commanders in rushing last year. Three different quarterbacks led their teams in rushing in week one. It's really wild to kind of watch. Do you expect Trevor Lawrence to take a step forward this year with Brian Thomas Jr. and Hunter? The name that's not mentioned there is the reason why I think he takes a step forward this year, and that would be Liam Cohen. Like, that's the reason that they lured him there. It's the reason that they snuck him there in the middle of the night to sign him. You sneaky bastard, Sean Codd. But they ended up getting their man, and they got the guy that they believe is going to get the most out of Trevor Lawrence. I don't know if you guys remember when he was coming out as a prospect of Clemson. Like, it was like, this is a Andrew Luck, like that type of prospect, that can't miss type of number one overall pick. And it just, for one reason or another, whether it was Urban Meyer and you shuffle again, he had a first year with Doug Peterson that went well, then took a step back the next year. Like, can you get the layups? Can you process it? Liam's going to put a lot on his plate. And my understanding is he's been very coachable to Liam. He thinks that. He thinks he's been picking it up. They want him to keep playing faster. Brian Thomas Jr. is a star in this league. He is going to be an absolute weapon. Talking to different receiver coaches around the league in the offseason about these, as I do this receiver show with Steve, is like his size in small space and tight windows and being able to move the size he has is outstanding. And obviously he's still the deep threat. But Lawrence, everything getting together is from Liam Cohen. And that's the big part of it. OBJ rumors, I think that's a wait and see. Let's see. I don't know. It was just a bunch of quarterbacks' names. Here, I'm just trying to see. I don't know what that means. JJ McCarthy, Jalen Hurts. Oh, just needs he just needs a QB. Yeah. I don't know what that means. All right, let's go to the Giants, and then we have plenty of time, actually, I think, to do a ton of stuff in this chat, which would be great. They're starting Russell Wilson. That's happening in week 2. How long does that continue? The Giants would like that to continue for an extended period of time, but I go back to the end of the season when I was covering that Steelers-Ravens game in the postseason and working on stuff for that and talking to teams that play the Steelers at the back end of last season. It was, Russ has become very, very predictable. He's looking for a deep shot. The moon ball's still there. The intermediate game doesn't really exist. Then he'll check down, or he might try to run and scramble a little bit. And the running and scramble part is an issue because he's gotten older and he's not as dynamic of a insane weapon like he used to be in the early portion of his career when he's used to just create and go off script. So that's been what the kind of book has been, and it didn't change in week 1. Now, he was under a ton of pressure. I mean, a ton of pressure. The offensive line has issues, and I think that's playing a part in this. I don't think they want to put Jackson Dart back on the field, put him on the field until Andrew Thomas is back, their left tackle, their best offensive lineman. Because a lot of what Jackson Dart does is, and you saw this in the preseason, right? It's that RPO game, it's that rolling to the right, it's the quick game, it's all that stuff. If they have somebody protecting the backside and the left tackle spot is secured, well, then Brian Daboll can do more with what he wants to do with Jackson Dart, with the up-tempo game and the energy that he brings and the way they can play quick with him. If you don't even have Andrew Thomas back yet, the whole offensive line's a question mark, and I'm not sure what the play calling really is for Jackson Dart with Brian Daboll. So If things go terrible against the Cowboys, could you maybe see Dart come in? I wouldn't be shocked by it. We haven't gotten any information that that's happening, but I wouldn't be shocked by it. If you look at the way Brian Dable has prepared Jackson Dart to come in, like say in the second half of this game, he's done it all offseason. He cut his headset off at times of practice to see if he could handle that. Why do you do that? Because that happens in actual games. And why do you do it in training camp? Because the guy's already picked up everything that you want him to pick up. Because usually rookie quarterbacks are swimming in training camp, and they are. But if you're able to do that and cut his headset out and see if he can do plays on his own, he already picked up the previous things you need him to do, right? You put him in for one play during a preseason game where you didn't know he was going in well before he was supposed to enter the game to see what he would do. These are all boxes Brian Dable's trying to check, and I think he loves Dart. I think he wants to do what's best for his quarterback's development. He was forced to play Josh Allen when he was in Buffalo way earlier than they wanted to. Way earlier than they wanted to. And he understood how they had to scramble through that season. Now, Josh grew a lot that year, ran all over the place, and you saw some of that raw talent that he had to do, but they didn't want to play him the way they played him in that rookie year in Buffalo. And I think Daboll's looking at that. I think Mike Kafka, who was with Mahomes in the beginning of his career, is looking at that. So all of this plays a part in it. I think the offensive system and the offensive line plays a part in this as well. They're here. Wilson was pressured on 16 of his 45 dropbacks. Like that's tough for any quarterback. I think that's really, really hard for a rookie quarterback specifically. So I just think their plan has been to play Russ. But plans change. They drafted Jackson Dart a month after they picked up, Russell Wilson on a 1-year deal, a 1-year, $10 million deal, essentially a rental, to make sure you had a quarterback in place, whether you were not knowing you were going to get a quarterback in the draft. So we'll see. I think the leash has been shortened. I think the patience has been shortened, and we'll see what happens against the Cowboys. Let's see. We got come back to Daddy Mahomes. Oh, I don't even know what that means. Oh, let's talk. I actually want to throw this out real quick. This Super Bowl rematch this weekend. Keep an eye on Jalen Carter. He is going to play. They suspended him for a game, but essentially since the spitting incident, which is absolutely disgusting, happened prior to the first snap, that week one was essentially his 1-game suspension, and he got docked an entire game check. I think it was $55,000 or $57,000, somewhere in that range. Either way, it's more money than all of us make for one Saturday or Sunday. But Kingsley Suamataia, that's right, at left guard has struggled, man, and he was bad against the Chargers, and that's where Jalen Carter's going to be. And can they get to Patrick Mahomes quickly? I think that's going to be a really interesting dynamic of how this happens up front. I really like that I can scroll over here. We need him to be on the Steelers. We're really liking this Tyreek chat, huh? Hubbard Etienne to start this week. Ooh. Etienne, you saw what they did to their backfield. Obviously, they want his role to be larger. I didn't know that was actually. See the real deal? Yeah, that kid at LSU is legit, but Neighbors is. There's no joke. Let's scroll back. See if there's any oldies in here. Hill to the Niners on a 1-year rental. I think the Niners are really good. And listen, Brandon Ayuk's going to be coming back. I think that's probably like a week 6 thing. And then you have Pearsall's growth, which they drafted him in the first round for a reason. He does everything that Kyle Shanahan wants you to do as a wide receiver. And then with Jennings as well, who had a great year last year with all of those injuries, then you have 3 pretty good receivers, and you get George Kittle back as well. I think you're in a decent spot. It's just guys staying healthy. That's just been an issue in San Francisco, and so that's a problem. Want Clowney back to the Ravens. I believe he's visiting the Cowboys today. They need some help, obviously, at pass rusher. I'm not sure if you heard that could be something there. Bryce Young toast. Ooh. This is one to really keep an eye on. Like, from all the goodwill that was gained in the back end of last year, this game just didn't seem to really flow for the Panthers at all. I think there's a couple things at play here. I think losing Adam Thielen is actually a big deal. Like, having a vet in that room is a big deal. And you have 2 young receivers that are still learning the NFL game. One's played 1 game. One's in their second year in Xavier Legette. And man, my man Mark Schlereth ripped him apart during the broadcast. I think having a timing offense with guys like that is tough. I'm not giving Bryce Young excuses. I don't know about going empty down there at the goal line, but that's what Dave Canales thought was a good play call. It's going to be difficult for them. I think. I don't know how good they are, but it was disappointing to see Bryce Young take a step back after everything we saw at the back end of last year. Do you feel like Bo Nix can actually be a franchise quarterback? I was at that game on Sunday. That's the game I covered. It wasn't great offensively. I thought he had no sense of urgency. I thought he was almost a little too calm, a little too lax, threw off platform at a lot of times where he probably didn't have to. I think that's a good defensive front. Talking to some of the Broncos offensive linemen, I think it was a good defensive front, maybe better than they thought. But it's not the way that you want him to come out and play in the first game of his second season. Now, do I think he still has obviously a pretty high upside and Sean Payton thinks the world of him? I thought some of the play calling was a bit bizarre from both guys, Brian Callahan included on the Titans side of things. Um, it was a discouraging opener for sure, but it actually was a little bit closer to on brand of what I saw during training camp when I stopped in there. Like the offense wasn't electric. Now they're going against one of the best defenses in football in camp, and you saw how good that defense was in the opener. Denver might have the best defense in football. But I think you need to see more out of your quarterback. I mean, the throw to Cortland was really, really good, but there was only a handful of really good balls. They need to run the ball better. They're changing personnel like crazy. I know that's what Sean wants to do, but some of the players thought that got them out of sync a little bit. So we'll see what happens against this game against the Colts. I don't think it's any pushover by any stretch whatsoever. So. Yeah, I think the Bengals' Oakland offense was an anomaly. I also think Myles Garrett played a big part of that. I'm not concerned about that offense. I think it's insane that they only got like 7 yards in the second half or whatever it was. I think it is a bit of an anomaly. I think Myles Garrett played a big part of that. All right, everybody. This was wonderful. Appreciate the couple compliments in there. That makes you feel kind of good on a Wednesday afternoon, right? Hopefully you all enjoy your weekends of football. I will see you next Wednesday at noon to noon 30 Eastern right here. And may your fantasy teams put up all the points that you desire, and may your teams win on Sunday. Everybody, take it easy.